book that we're launching today. So there's David, myself and Greg McLaren. And today this is our third novel, and we're very, very happy for it to be Matthew Karpin's. We're very, very happy for it to be Matthew Karpin's. A Sydney creature, we could call. So most of you know him from there. He has obviously studied at Sydney University and has been writing ever since. I won't myself talk about the novel, though I could. I didn't mean like that. I mean positively. Broadcaster in Western Australia, at Parliament House in Canberra and in Sydney. For 4 years, Simon was the ABC's state political reporter for television news and was based at Parliament House in Macquarie Street.
How about I try then, is there anyone here from the ABC? ABC Books? Actually, we won't go into ABC Books and their recent publishing history. Oh, good. Well, I just want to say how brave it is of the good people at Puncher and Wadman and in Glee Books, and indeed Matthew Karpin, to publish a work like this. And particularly to publish it as a work of fiction. No doubt it would have been easier to have marketed Matthew's latest endeavours as social commentary, a critique, or even, dare I suggest, a work of history, to be all things to all people. To capture that mass market so the publisher can justify having taken a risk on this author or that one. I well remember Matthew Karpin from my days up the road here at Sydney University. I may not have got the degree, but I certainly remember Matthew. He was dressed in black. Well, we were all dressed in black. Matthew still is. It was the 1980s, the late 1980s, the time of Bob Hawke, of Paul Keating as Treasurer, the recession that we had to have, the Banana Republic. John Howard was nowhere near being Prime Minister, let alone holding the job for a decade, on what he called his novella. But before he produced it, he had to slave away at his day job. And that day job was helping cocksure university students understand the concept of a deadline, understand that their angst-ridden musings did not necessarily make good poetry, but the softness in Matthew would publish them anyway in the Union Record. His own Washington correspondent for television, Mark Simpkin, for one, while others have dabbled a little bit in reporting politics, even politics of the style practiced by the New South Wales right. Now that I've got us to the topic of Matthew's novel, and that's a novel, a piece of fiction, which may or may not be based on a modicum of fact, cryptically called The Right. Now that I've got us all there, I might have to reveal to some of you, as Matt referred to earlier, that I spent more than 4 years of my life, of my career, down in Macquarie Street, trying my best to understand the New South Wales right. Of course, I soon came to realise that most of the power was actually being wielded at the other end of town, not in Macquarie Street, but in Sussex Street, where the Union movement and the Labor Party headquarters was. But back to Macquarie Street and that infamous bear bit. How could Bob Carr, man of letters, US history buff, expert in ancient Rome and Greece, be of the same faction as Joe Tripodi? Or indeed, the same faction as Reba Ma? How could those incongruous people belong to the same club? How could Bob Carr depend on Eddie Obeid, among others, to deliver him the cabinet that he wanted. I think Matthew has a rather interesting little description for the culture as he sees it in his work of fiction. He says it's a twisty-turny, slippery, shitty rope around everyone's neck. That's how he describes the New South Wales right. Matthew's characters would say in the book, to get ahead in politics, you had to have that public profile to climb up the right's shitty rope. In my time in Macquarie Street, Bob Carr grew tired of his job, supposedly while he was walking along the beach in Maruga with Elena. He retired and up stepped Morris Yema. Now, Morris Yema was largely unknown when he became mayor. Then the media portrayed them, with some help I might add from the ALP's image makers, as an ordinary bloke who loves a barbecue, or going to a St George match, or even a Swans match. But never, Matthew, never the rugby union. And until you all have a chance to read the book, you might get that. But that's why this book is a work of fiction. The New South Wales right wouldn't have been seen dead at the rugby union. Can you believe that dastardly media, particularly our friends at the Sydney Morning Herald? Anyone here from the Sydney Morning Herald tonight? And to a lesser extent from the Daily Telegraph, started saying, poor old Morris Yema, he couldn't make a decision. He was a ditherer. Forget his friends in cabinet who leaked against him. The dithering was just a media creation. It had nothing to do with the focus groups and the questions put to them by the controlling Labor right, and sometimes known as the party machine. It had nothing to do, the dithering, with the fact that at the same time he was being accused in the media of being a ditherer. There were people within his own party, within his own faction, doing those focus groups at the same time, saying, you're a ditherer. What do you think? Then in the book, there's the Premier, Tom Balcom, who knows his days are up, who knows he's headed for the chop, but he wants to go out on his terms. He wants to go out, as Matthew puts it, with a soft landing, not ignominy. A creature, a creation of his faction. There in place for as long as he's of value. There's a lot more to the right than I've had time to go into here tonight. I mean, you might be shocked to hear there's gay sex, there's cheating, there's lust. There's lust in these pages here. And in the Labor Party. And lust at the highest levels. Gay sex at the highest levels in this book here. Equally, there's betrayal. Crossing. Double crossing. Promises made, but promises rarely kept. There's plotting. And there's what I'd like to call an insight into how power is won and how power is wielded. The stuff of politics we're regularly told by the media. Through Matthew, the reader can delve into the minds of some of the people who find politics so alluring. Some of those people who knows, in Matthew's words, in his book, it can be a twisty, turny, slippery, shitty rope around everyone's neck.
Thanks, Simon. Welcome to the ride launch, everyone. Very opposite comments, I thought. I like the way you commented on the politics of the novel. The publisher will approve. A launch is certainly an opportunity to say thank you, and I have a lot of thanks to give. But there's a list of acknowledgements on the final page of the book. And each person who's thanked there is involved in a story of their own in regard to this novel, of novelistic proportions. At this point, however, I'd like to thank David Musgrave in particular.